Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I invite you to close your eyes, to let your mind wander softly into the slow, steady rhythm of the past, into a world where the ticking of clocks was not yet invented, where people moved by the light of the sun and the glow of candles, and where ideals of beauty were crafted not by glowing screens, but by whispers, portraits, and tapestries. We will drift gently into the landscapes of medieval Europe and beyond, to explore what people considered beautiful, how those standards tied into their culture, and how, through centuries of time, they shaped lives, destinies, and quiet expectations. It is not an exciting story, not a loud story, but a long and gentle story, a story meant to slow you down, to lull you, and to let history carry you softly toward sleep. In the medieval world, beauty was not only about appearance, but also about status, health, and symbolism. Imagine a candlelit hall, where nobles sit around tables covered with bread, cheese, and wine, where the glow falls on faces pale from a lack of sunlight, faces powdered or covered by veils, where beauty is not just seen but also interpreted. The medieval sense of beauty was tied to morality and spirituality, so much so that looking a certain way was thought to reflect the inner soul. Pale skin, for example, was considered beautiful because it suggested that one did not labor outdoors in the fields. A soft, unmarked complexion reflected not only wealth but also purity, almost angelic in quality. The more delicate and fragile the appearance, the more desirable it seemed. Hair too held enormous meaning. In medieval romances and poems, long flowing hair was a sign of femininity and virtue, especially golden or light-colored hair, which in art was often linked with divine figures. Blonde hair was praised in literature as the hallmark of noble beauty, though in reality, many women sought to lighten their hair with herbal rinses or exposure to the sun. In men, hair could symbolize strength or status, but excessive grooming was sometimes frowned upon as vanity. Beards might be seen as noble, but clean-shaven faces were also praised in certain courts, reflecting an ever-shifting balance between ideals. The forehead was another curious feature of beauty. A high, broad forehead was admired, seen as a sign of intelligence and refinement. Women sometimes plucked or shaved their hairlines to give the impression of a taller forehead, a practice that might seem strange to us now but was considered elegant then. Thin, arched eyebrows added to this look, carefully shaped to maintain a refined face that conformed to the era's ideals. Clothing, too, shaped beauty. Fabrics were chosen not just for comfort but to display wealth and elegance. Silk, velvet, and brocade marked the higher classes, while peasants wore wool and linen. The shape of gowns and tunics emphasized certain traits. Women's dresses often had fitted bodices and long flowing sleeves, drawing attention to slender hands and wrists, which were seen as graceful and beautiful. A narrow waist was valued, though it was less extreme than the later corseted ideals of the Renaissance and Baroque times. Men's tunics and surcoats could be tailored to highlight broad shoulders or strong frames, emphasizing the masculine ideal of strength coupled with nobility. Yet medieval beauty standards were not uniform across Europe. In some regions, fuller figures were praised because they signified prosperity, fertility, and abundance. A round face, soft cheeks, and a more substantial body could be admired as signs that one had enough food and comfort to live well. Thinness, by contrast, might be linked with sickness or poverty. Thus, what was beautiful in one place or one century might shift and change in another. Jewelry and adornment added another layer to the story. A jeweled headdress or a finely wrought belt could elevate one's beauty in the eyes of others, not simply as decoration but as a visible statement of rank and refinement. Pearls symbolized purity, rubies symbolized passion, sapphires were associated with heaven, and gold was universally tied to wealth and prestige. Even the simplest gesture, such as placing a ring on a finger, became not just a personal ornament but a declaration of identity, status, and belonging. The church also played a powerful role in shaping beauty ideals. It often warned against vanity, urging believers to remember that inner virtue mattered more than outer appearance. Still, religious imagery often showed holy figures as beautiful, pure, and glowing with divine light. The Virgin Mary was depicted with serene, flawless features, and saints were portrayed as radiant, reinforcing the idea that beauty could reflect goodness. This created a quiet tension in medieval society, between the celebration of beauty and the fear of pride, between the natural desire to appear attractive and the moral caution against caring too much about appearances. Men, too, lived under beauty expectations, though these were less often spoken aloud. A knight was expected to have strength, bravery, and a certain bearing that went beyond mere looks. Broad shoulders, a straight posture, and the ability to carry armor with dignity were all parts of the male ideal. Yet courtly love literature also praised gentler qualities, fairness of face, elegance of manners, and the charm of a graceful demeanor. A knight might be admired not only for how he fought but for how he looked at his lady, how he carried himself in the hall, how his presence embodied both strength and refinement. Across different parts of the medieval world, ideals shifted again. In the Islamic courts of medieval Spain, beauty was described in poetry with deep admiration for dark, expressive eyes, delicate hands, and the fragrance of perfumes. In Asia, during overlapping periods, porcelain-like skin, long hair, and refined features were admired. In Africa, scarification and adornment with beads or medals carried cultural meaning, defining beauty through artistry and symbolism. These diverse standards remind us that beauty has always been shaped by context, by environment, by what each culture valued in survival, morality, and art. As centuries passed, ideals slowly shifted. By the late medieval period, the beginnings of Renaissance thought were already visible, where more naturalistic portrayals of the body began to appear in art. Yet the medieval focus on symbolism, on beauty as a reflection of status and morality, lingered. Paintings from this time show women with serene faces, small mouths, delicate chins, and slender fingers, all arranged to create an aura of otherworldly grace. But beauty standards were not only for the highborn. Even among common people, ideas of attractiveness existed, though shaped less by luxury and more by practicality. A strong, healthy appearance might be more admired in rural villages than a pale, fragile one. Hands that could work the land, faces that showed vigor, and bodies that could endure labor had their own form of appeal. Beauty, even here, was linked to survival and to the values of the community. One might think of medieval beauty as something slow, measured, and heavy with symbolism. It was not the quick flash of a photograph, but the lingering impression left by a carefully crafted image on a tapestry, the poetic description sung by troubadours, the hushed admiration shared in candlelit chambers. It was beauty tied to ideals of morality, of status, of prosperity, and of spiritual symbolism. It was beauty crafted, not only by appearance but by the meanings people attached to that appearance. When we reflect on these standards today, they may seem distant, strange, or even arbitrary. The high forehead, the pale skin, the slender hands, these may not be our current ideals, yet they were powerful then, shaping how people presented themselves, how they judged one another, how they dreamed of love, status, and belonging. And just as our standards shift with time, theirs shifted too, moving slowly with the rhythms of centuries, leaving behind traces in art, poetry, and memory. And so, as we drift through this long and quiet journey, we realize that beauty has always been both simple and complex, both surface and symbol. The medieval world tied beauty to wealth, to purity, to morality, to survival, to faith, and to art. It was never just about the face in the mirror, but about the story that face told to the world. And now, as the echoes of that distant time settle into silence, I invite you to let these thoughts fade like candlelight at the end of a medieval evening. Let the slow weight of history, the pale foreheads, the delicate fingers, the shimmering gowns, and the broad shoulders of knights drift into the background of your mind. Let them become a soft tapestry behind your eyelids, woven not to excite, not to startle, but simply to soothe, to slow, and to rest. For history, when told gently, becomes not a lesson but a lullaby, not a burden but a soft blanket of time wrapping itself around you. And so we close this story, this long, uneventful, quiet story of beauty in medieval times, and of how history, in its calmest voice, can carry us gently to the edge of sleep.